The awakening. The alarms blared across Lunar Base Alpha, their shrill cry cutting through the usual hum of life support systems. Commander Elena Reyes sprinted down the corridor, her mag boots clacking against the metal floor. She burst into the command center, breathless. "Status report," she barked. Lieutenant Zhang swiveled in his chair, his face ashen. "Commander, long-range sensors have detected a massive energy signature entering the solar system. It's unlike anything we've ever seen." Reyes leaned over Zhang's console, her eyes widening as she took in the readings. The energy output was off the charts, dwarfing even the largest human vessels. "Origin? Unknown, ma'am. But it's not ours, and it's not natural. We're looking at first contact." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Humanity had long wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now it seemed they had their answer. "Alert Earth Defense Command," Reyes ordered, "and get me a visual." The main screen flickered to life, showing a distant point of light. As they watched, it resolved into a vast shape, angular and alien. It was a ship, but one that made Earth's largest vessels look like toys in comparison. "My God," someone whispered. Reyes straightened, her jaw set. "Broadcast on all frequencies. Let's hope they're friendly." But even as the words left her mouth, she knew. The ship's design, bristling with what could only be weapon emplacements, told a different story. This was no peaceful envoy. Suddenly, the alien vessel unleashed a barrage of energy weapons. The lunar surface erupted in explosions, rocking the base. Reyes grabbed onto a console to keep her footing. "Return fire," she shouted. "Get our ships in the air." But it was futile. Earth's defenses, which had seemed so formidable just moments ago, were being swept aside like leaves in a storm. The alien ship didn't even slow down as it plowed through the defensive line, heading straight for Earth. In the chaos of the attack, no one noticed the blinking light on a long-dormant console. Deep beneath the lunar surface, in a chamber forgotten by time, something ancient stirred to life. General Marcus Blackwood stood in the war room of Earth Defense Command, surrounded by holographic displays showing the unfolding disaster. The alien ship had brushed aside their best defenses and was now in low Earth orbit, raining destruction on the planet below. "We need options, people," Blackwood roared. "I refuse to believe this is the end of humanity." A junior officer, her uniform rumpled and eyes red from lack of sleep, hesitantly spoke up. "Sir, there might be something, but it's classified beyond top secret." Blackwood fixed her with a steely gaze. "Spit it out, soldier. The world's ending. I think we can ignore some red tape." The officer nodded, tapping at her datapad. "It's called Project Lazarus, sir. Initiated during the resource wars of the mid-21st century. They built dreadnoughts. Warships of unimaginable power." A murmur ran through the room. The resource wars were a dark chapter in human history, a time when nations turned on each other as vital supplies dwindled. It had led to unprecedented advances in military technology, but at a terrible cost. "And where are these dreadnoughts now?" Blackwood demanded. "That's just it, sir. They were mothballed, hidden away. The project leaders feared they were too powerful, that they might destroy humanity instead of saving it. But there were fail-safes, in case of an extinction-level threat." As if on cue, alarms began to blare. One of the technicians called out, "Sir, we're detecting massive energy spikes from the moon." On the main screen, they watched in awe as the lunar surface seemed to split open. Rising from the depths came a ship that dwarfed even the alien vessel. Its hull was scarred and pitted, bearing the marks of battles long past. But there was no mistaking its power. "My God," Blackwood whispered, "it's beautiful." The dreadnought's engines flared to life, propelling it towards Earth with impossible speed. As it approached, more details became visible. Its hull was bristling with weapon systems that defied comprehension, technologies that seemed to bend the very fabric of space-time. The alien ship, perhaps sensing the threat, turned to face this new challenger. But it was too late. The dreadnought opened fire, unleashing a barrage that lit up the sky. Beams of energy that could crack a planet in half lanced out, carving through the alien vessel's shields like they weren't even there. In the war room, jaws dropped as they witnessed the awesome destructive power of humanity's forgotten guardians. The alien ship, which had seemed invincible just moments ago, was being torn apart. But even as hope began to surge, Blackwood's tactical mind was racing. One dreadnought might not be enough, and more importantly, he was going to crew these ancient behemoths. "Get me everything we have on Project Lazarus," he ordered, "and start compiling a list of our best and brightest. We're going to need pilots, engineers, tacticians, people crazy enough to fly ships that by all rights shouldn't even exist." As the staff scrambled to obey, Blackwood turned back to the display. The dreadnought had made short work of the alien vessel, which was now nothing more than expanding debris. But he knew this was just the beginning. "Send out the call," he said, his voice grim. Tell them Earth needs heroes." As the message went out, carried on every frequency and network still functioning, the dreadnought hung in low orbit, a silent sentinel. And deep in the void of space, more alien ships were turning their attention to this unexpected resistance. The battle for Earth had only just begun. First contact. The command deck of the UESS Defiant hummed with nervous energy as Captain Arias Sato studied the holographic display. The dreadnought, awakened from its centuries-long slumber, cut through space with a grace that belied its massive size. Behind it, a ragtag fleet of Earth's remaining ships struggled to keep pace. "Status report," Sato barked, her eyes never leaving the sea of stars before them. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, a wiry man with a shock of red hair, responded crisply. "All systems nominal, Captain. The dreadnought's AI is still integrating with our systems, but weapons and shields are at full capacity." Sato nodded, a grim smile playing at the corners of her mouth. When General Blackwood had called for volunteers to crew the newly awakened dreadnoughts, she'd been among the first to step forward. The past week had been a crash course in operating technology centuries ahead of anything they'd known before. "Any sign of our visitors?" she asked. As if in answer, alarms blared across the bridge. The holographic display flickered, showing a swarm of red dots emerging from the darkness of space. "Multiple contacts," Jackson shouted. "Christ, there must be hundreds of them." Sato's jaw clenched. This was it. Humanity's first true engagement with the alien force that had nearly wiped them out in that initial surprise attack. The X-Awful, as they'd come to be known through intercepted communications. "Battle stations," she ordered, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her gut. "Prepare to engage." The Defiant's weapon systems hummed to life, energy building in its massive cannons. The smaller Earth ships fell into formation behind it, a steel wall between humanity and extinction. As the X-Awful fleet drew closer, Sato could make out more details. Their ships were organic in design, all sweeping curves and iridescent holes that seemed to shift and pulse. Beautiful in a terrifying way. "Open a channel," Sato commanded. "All frequencies." She took a deep breath, aware that her next words might be the most important ever spoken by a human being. "This is Captain Arias Sato of the United Earth ship Defiant. You've attacked our world without provocation. We demand your immediate surrender and withdrawal from Earth space." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a voice responded, deep, resonant, and utterly alien. "We are the X-Awful. Your species is young, your civilization primitive. Surrender now, and we will be merciful. Resist, and you will be eradicated." Sato's eyes narrowed. "I'm afraid that's not an option. Humanity doesn't bow to bullies, no matter how advanced they might be." She cut the transmission with a sharp gesture. "All ships engage at will. Show these bastards what humanity is made of." The space between the two fleets erupted in a dazzling light show as energy weapons crisscrossed the void. The Defiant's main cannon fired, a beam of pure destruction that carved through the X-Awful formation, vaporizing several ships instantly. But the aliens responded with equal ferocity. Their weapons, while not as overwhelmingly powerful as the dreadnoughts, were numerous and precise. Earth ships began to fall, their hulls breached by weapons that seemed to ignore conventional shields. Evasive maneuvers, Sato ordered as the Defiant shuddered under a barrage of alien fire. Concentrate fire on their flagship. The massive dreadnought pivoted with impossible agility, its point defense systems creating a web of intercepting fire that kept the worst of the Xorful assault at bay. Its main cannon fired again and again, each shot annihilating swords of enemy ships. But for every alien vessel destroyed, more seemed to take its place. The Xorful fleet was vast, stretching out beyond the range of their sensors. "Captain," Jackson called out, his voice strained. "Our support ships are taking heavy losses. We can't hold this position much longer." Sato gritted her teeth. They were outnumbered and outgunned, even with the dreadnought's awesome firepower. But retreat wasn't an option. Earth lay defenseless behind them. Suddenly, an idea struck her. "The dreadnought's AA," she said. "It must have records of all its previous battles. Jackson, interface with it. See if there's anything in its databanks we can use." Jackson's fingers flew over his console, interfacing with the ancient AA. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then his eyes widened. "Captain, I think I found something. The dreadnought's equipped with a device called a phase shifter. It can move the ship out of normal space-time." "Can we use it to escape?" Sato asked, hope rising in her chest. Jackson shook his head. "Not exactly, but we might be able to use it offensively. If we calibrate it just right, we could phase part of the Xorful fleet out of normal space. They'd be trapped between dimensions." It was a desperate plan, bordering on suicidal. But as Sato looked at the tactical display, watching more and more friendly signatures wink out, she knew they were out of options. "Do it," she ordered. The Defiant surged forward, plowing through the Xorful formation. Its hull blazed with impacts, shields flickering dangerously. But it pressed on, driving towards the heart of the enemy fleet. "Phase shifter charged," Jackson called out. "Ready on your mark." Sato watched the range tick down, her heart pounding. They'd only get one shot at this. Wait for it. Wait for it. Now. Reality itself seemed to twist and warp around them. A sphere of distortion expanded from the Defiant, engulfing a large portion of the Xorful fleet. Where it passed, alien ships simply vanished, trapped in a bubble of altered space-time. For a moment, there was stunned silence on both sides. Then, taking advantage of the confusion, Sato barked out new orders. "All ships, concentrate fire on the remaining enemy vessels. Push them back." The tide of battle shifted. With a significant portion of their fleet trapped in the phase bubble, the Xorful found themselves suddenly outnumbered. The remaining Earth ships pressed their advantage, their morale soaring at this unexpected turn of events. Hours later, as the last Xorful ship retreated into the depths of space, Sato allowed herself a small smile. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had won its first major engagement against a vastly superior foe. But as she looked out at the field of debris that had once been ships, both alien and human, her smile faded. This was only the beginning. The Xorful would be back, and in greater numbers. "Set a course for Earth," she ordered, her voice heavy with the weight of command. "We need to prepare. The real war is just starting." As the Defiant turned homeward, the phase bubble shimmered behind them, a grim reminder of the lengths they'd have to go to ensure humanity's survival in a suddenly much larger and more dangerous universe. The dreadnought rising. The cavernous hangar bay of Lunar Base Alpha buzzed with activity. Engineers and technicians swarmed over the hull of a newly awakened dreadnought, its massive form dwarfing the human figures that scrambled across its surface like ants. Admiral Elena Reyes stood on an observation platform, watching the organized chaos below with a mix of pride and apprehension. "Impressive, isn't it?" a gruff voice said behind her. Reyes turned to see General Marcus Blackwood approach, his weathered face set in its usual stern expression. She nodded, gesturing to the scene below. "3 months ago, we didn't even know these ships existed. Now they're our best hope for survival." Blackwood grunted in agreement. "The Lazarus Project is living up to its name, bringing the dead back to life." 6 dreadnoughts have been awakened so far, that AI systems slowly integrating with modern technology. Each was a technological marvel, housing weapons and defenses far beyond anything humanity had developed on its own. "How goes the crew training?" Reyes asked, turning her attention back to the general. "Better than expected," Blackwood replied. "The ship A's are cooperative, almost eager to share their knowledge. It's as if they've been waiting for this moment." Reyes suppressed a shiver. The idea of these ancient warships having their own agendas was unsettling, to say the least. But they needed every advantage they could get against the Exorthal. An alarm blared, cutting through the background noise of the hangar. Both officers tensed, hands instinctively moving to their communicators. "This is not a drill," a voice announced over the base-wide speakers. "Long-range sensors have detected a large Exorthal fleet entering the solar system. All personnel to battle stations. Repeat, this is not a drill." Reyes and Blackwood exchanged a grim look. The moment they had been preparing for had arrived. "Looks like we'll be testing these old girls sooner than we thought," Blackwood muttered. Reyes nodded, already moving towards the command center. "Let's hope they're up to the task." Captain Aria Sato stood on the bridge of the UESS Defiant, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Exorthal fleet was massive, easily dwarfing the force they had faced in their first encounter. But this time, humanity was better prepared. 6 dreadnoughts, including the Defiant, formed the core of Earth's defense fleet. Around them, hundreds of smaller ships took up formation, a mix of hastily upgraded civilian vessels and military craft. "All ships reporting ready, Captain," Lieutenant Commander Jackson announced, his voice steady despite the tension palpable on the bridge. Sato nodded, her jaw set. "Open a channel to the fleet." As the communication link established, she took a deep breath. The words she was about to say would be heard by every human defender in the system. "This is Captain Sato. The enemy we face today threatens not just our lives, but our very existence as a species. They believe us weak, primitive, easy prey. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity will not go quietly into the night. We fight not just for ourselves, but for every generation that will come after us. For Earth." A chorus of cheers erupted over the comm channel, the determination in the voices of the fleet crew members almost palpable. As if in response to humanity's defiance, the Exorthal fleet accelerated, their organic-looking ships forming into attack formations. "Here they come," Jackson muttered. Sato's eyes narrowed. "All ships engage at will. Concentrate fire on their lead vessels. Let's show them what these dreadnoughts can do." The space between the two fleets erupted in a dazzling display of destructive energy. The dreadnoughts unleashed their primary weapons, beams of concentrated power that cut through the Exorthal formations like a scythe through wheat. Smaller human ships darted between the behemoths, their more conventional weapons adding to the barrage. But the Exorthal were not unprepared. They had learned from their previous encounter, and their tactics had evolved. Their ships moved in complex patterns, making targeting difficult, and when their return fire came, it was devastating. "Shields at 80% and falling," Jackson reported as the Defiant shuddered under a barrage of alien weapons fire. Sato gripped the arms of her command chair. "Evasive maneuvers. Bring us about for another attack run." The battle raged for hours, a titanic clash that would be remembered for generations. The dreadnoughts proved their worth time and again, their ancient weapons systems tearing through Exorthal defenses. But the aliens' numbers seemed endless, and for every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. "Captain," Jackson's voice was strained. We're detecting a massive energy buildup in the Thorfall flagship. Whatever they're charging, it's big enough to take out a planet. Sato's blood ran cold. If that weapon fired, Earth would be defenseless. There was only one option. All power to engines, she ordered. Set a collision course for the Thorfall flagship. The bridge crew looked at her in shock, but no one questioned the order. The Defiant surged forward, plowing through the chaos of the battle towards its target. Aria. It was Admiral Reyes, her face appearing on the main view screen. What are you doing? What needs to be done? Sato replied, her voice calm despite the maelstrom of emotions inside her. The Defiant's reactor going critical inside their flagship should be enough to take it out. The rest of the fleet can handle what's left. Reyes looked like she wanted to argue, but instead she simply nodded. Godspeed, Captain. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. As the Defiant closed in on its target, alarms blared across the bridge. The Exorthal had realized their intent and were concentrating all fire on the approaching dreadnought. Shields failing, Jackson reported, his voice steady despite the situation. Hull breaches on multiple decks. Saito stood from her chair, facing her crew. It's been an honor serving with all of you. For Earth. For Earth, they echoed. The Defiant slammed into the Thorfall flagship at near-relativistic speeds. For a moment, it seemed as if time itself held its breath. Then, a blinding flash lit up the battlefield as the dreadnought's reactor went critical. The Thorfall flagship, along with a significant portion of their fleet, vanished in the explosion. The remaining alien ships, suddenly without leadership and facing a reinvigorated human fleet, began to retreat. As the light of the explosion faded, Admiral Reyes stood in the lunar base command center, tears in her eyes but her voice firm as she gave the order. All ships pursue and destroy. Today, we avenge the Defiant. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity is here to stay. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. As Earth's fleet moved to chase down the retreating Thorfall, the sacrifices made this day would fuel their determination. Humanity had proven itself a force to be reckoned with, and the legend of the dreadnoughts and the brave souls who crewed them would echo across the stars for ages to come. Battle for the Orion Arm. The holographic display in the war room of Earth Defense Command showed a vast swath of the Milky Way galaxy, with the Orion Arm highlighted in pulsing red. Admiral Elena Reyes stood before it, her face etched with the wariness of months of constant warfare. The Exorthal have established a foothold in these systems, she said, gesturing to a cluster of stars. They're using them as staging grounds for attacks on our colonies and supply lines. Around the table sat the remaining leaders of Earth's military and government. General Blackwood, his hair now more gray than black, nodded grimly. We need to push them back, or we'll be fighting a war of attrition we can't win. A murmur of agreement ran through the room. The past 6 months had seen humanity transition from a defensive stance to a more aggressive posture, taking the fight to Thorfall space. The ancient dreadnoughts had proven invaluable, their power allowing Earth's forces to stand toe-to-toe with the technologically superior aliens. We have an opportunity, Reyes continued, zooming in on a particular star system. Our intelligence suggests this is the location of a major Thorfall supply depot. If we can take it out, we'll cripple their ability to sustain their offensive in this sector. It's deep in enemy territory, a young colonel pointed out. How do we get our forces there without being detected? A slow smile spread across Reyes' face. That's where our newest asset comes in. She tapped a control, and the hologram shifted to show a massive ship unlike any they'd seen before. It was sleek and predatory, its hull covered in strange, shifting patterns that seemed to bend light around it. This is the Chuckle-Late, Reyes explained. One of the dreadnoughts we awakened last month. Its primary function is stealth and infiltration. With this, we can slip a strike force right into the heart of Thorfall space. The room erupted in excited chatter. For the first time in months, there was a palpable sense of hope. "Who will lead this mission?" Blackwood asked, his eyes never leaving the image of the Shadowblade. Reyes straightened, her voice firm. "I will." The Shadowblade sliced through the void of space, its cloaking technology rendering it invisible to both sight and senses. On the bridge, Admiral Reyes watched the alien stars streak by, her mind racing with the details of the upcoming operation. "Approaching the target system, Admiral," her tactical officer reported. "No sign of detection." Reyes nodded. "Bring us out of stealth near the third planet. That's where the depot should be." As the Shadowblade decelerated, the system's star grew from a pinprick to a blazing orb. Around it orbited several planets, and there, just where intelligence had predicted, was a massive space station surrounded by exorbitant ships. "Launch our fighters," Reyes ordered. "Have them target the station's defensive systems. We'll take out their capital ships." The Shadowblade's hangar bays opened, disgorging swarms of sleek fighters. As they streaked towards the alien station, the dreadnought itself decloaked, its weapon systems coming online with a vengeance. The Exorthal, caught completely by surprise, scrambled to respond, but by the time their ships began to move into defensive formations, it was too late. The Shadowblade's main cannon fired, a beam of energy so intense it seemed to distort space itself. It struck the largest Exorthal vessel dead center, cutting through its shields like they weren't even there. The alien ship split in two, secondary explosions rippling along its hull. "Press the attack," Reyes shouted. "Don't let them regroup." The battle that followed was short but intense. Human fighters darted between lumbering Exorthal cruisers, their weapons finding weak spots in alien defenses. The Shadowblade moved with impossible grace for a ship its size, its advanced targeting systems allowing it to strike with pinpoint accuracy. But the Exorthal fought back with desperate ferocity. Strange, organic-looking missiles sought out human ships, facing through shields to detonate against hulls. Beams of coruscating energy lashed out, melting through armor plating. "Admiral," her tactical officer called out. "We're detecting a massive energy build-up in the station. I think they're going to scuttle it." Rey's eyes widened. If the station's reactor went critical, it would take out everything in the system, including the Shadowblade and its crew. "All ships, fall back," she ordered. "Prepare for emergency warp." But even as she gave the order, she knew it was too late. The alien station was already beginning to break apart, arcs of energy crackling between the fragments. Suddenly, a new voice broke in over the comm system. "This is Captain Way of the Stormbreaker. We've got this, Admiral." Reyes watched in awe as another dreadnought burst into the system, its hull crackling with energy. The Stormbreaker positioned itself between the disintegrating station and the rest of the human fleet. Activating temporal stasis field, Captain Way's calm voice reported. A bubble of distorted space expanded from the Stormbreaker, enveloping the exploding station. Within it, the destruction seemed to slow, then stop entirely, frozen in a moment of time. "Get your people out of here, Admiral," Way said. "We'll hold this as long as we can." Reyes hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "All ships, jump to emergency coordinates. Godspeed, Stormbreaker." As the Shadowblade and its escorts vanished into warp, Reyes caught a last glimpse of the Stormbreaker, holding back the fury of an exploding star with sheer technological might. Hours later, as the fleet regrouped at a secure location, reports started coming in. The Stormbreaker had survived, though heavily damaged. The Exorthal supply depot was destroyed, along with a significant portion of their fleet in the sector. It was a major victory, one that would change the course of the war. But as Reyes looked out at the battered ships of her fleet, she knew the cost had been high. "Send out a general broadcast," she told a communications officer, "to all human colonies and outposts. Tell them that the tide is turning, that humanity stands strong, and that we will not rest until every last Exorthal ship is driven from our space." As the message went out, carried across the vast distances of the Orion Arm, a new sense of determination settled over the human forces. They had proven that even against seemingly insurmountable odds, humanity's ingenuity and courage could prevail. The battle for the Orion Arm was far from over, but for the first time since the war began, victory seemed not just possible, but inevitable. Counterattack. The UESS Prometheus, the latest and most advanced of Earth's awakened dreadnoughts, cut through the inky blackness of deep space. Its sleek hull, a fusion of ancient technology and modern innovations, gleamed under the light of unfamiliar stars. On the bridge, Fleet Admiral Jonas Chen watched the tactical display with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. "Status report," he ordered, his voice calm despite the tension that hung in the air. His XO, Commander Zara Okoi, responded crisply. "All systems nominal, Admiral. The fleet is in formation and awaiting your command. We'll reach the edge of thoughtful space in approximately 30 minutes. Chen nodded, his eyes never leaving the holographic display. This mission, dubbed Operation Spearhead, represented humanity's most ambitious offensive yet. After months of preparation and smaller skirmishes, they were finally taking the fight directly to the Toethal homeworlds. "Open a channel to the fleet," Chen said. As the comm system crackled to life, he took a deep breath. "This is Fleet Admiral Chen. In a few moments, we will cross into Toethal territory. Our mission is clear: to strike at the heart of the Empire and force them to the negotiating table. Remember your training, trust in your ships, and above all, watch out for each other. Today, we fight not just for Earth, but for the future of our species. Good hunting." As he closed the channel, alerts sounded from the sensor station. "Sir," the officer called out, "we're detecting some kind of anomaly at the coordinates of our planned entry point." Chen frowned. On screen, the main view screen flickered to life, showing a swirling vortex of energy where empty space should have been. It pulsed with an otherworldly light, its edges constantly shifting and reforming. "Analysis?" Chen demanded. Okoi studied her readings, her brow furrowed. "It appears to be some kind of spatial rift, sir. Similar to our phase shift technology, but on a much larger scale. I think it's a trap." Chen's mind raced. The Exorthal must have anticipated their attack and set up this barrier. But how? Unless... "They've broken our codes," he realized aloud. They knew exactly where we'd be entering their space. A heady silence fell over the bridge. If the Exorthal had compromised their communications, the entire operation could be at risk. But Chen wasn't about to let months of planning go to waste. "Helm, adjust our course. Take us in 20 degrees to starboard of the anomaly. Tactical, prepare to fire a full spread of chronotorpedoes into that rift. Let's see how they like a taste of their own medicine." The fleet moved with practiced precision, angling away from the trap. As they approached the new entry point, the Prometheus shuddered as it launched its payload. The chronotorpedoes, weapons that disrupted the very fabric of space-time, streaked towards the anomaly. The resulting explosion was spectacular. The rift collapsed in on itself, sending out a shockwave that rocked even the massive dreadnoughts. But as the energy dissipated, a clear path into Toethal space lay before them. "All ships, advance," Chen ordered. The human fleet surged forward, crossing the border into enemy territory. Almost immediately, alarms blared as Toethal ships appeared on sensors, moving to intercept. What followed was a battle unlike any in human history. The space around them lit up with weapons fire, beams of energy and swarms of missiles crisscrossing the void. The dreadnoughts proved their worth time and again, their advanced shields absorbing punishment that would have vaporized lesser ships. But it was the smaller, more agile human vessels that truly shone. Squadrons of fighters darted between the lumbering Toethal cruisers, exploiting weaknesses and sowing chaos in the alien formations. As the battle raged, Chen noticed something odd. "Commander Okoi," he called out, "are you seeing this? The Exorthal ships, they're not fighting with the same coordination we've seen before. Okoye nodded, her eyes narrowing as she studied the tactical display. You're right, sir. It's almost as if they're not all following the same orders. A wild idea began to form in Chen's mind. Hail the soulful flagship, he ordered. Let's see if we can't shed some light on this situation. To everyone's surprise, the hail was answered almost immediately. The view screen flickered, and an alien face appeared. But it wasn't the insectoid visage they had come to associate with the Soulful. This being was almost humanoid. This is Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Fleet, Chen said, keeping his voice steady despite his shock. To whom am I speaking? The alien's expression was difficult to read, but its voice, when it spoke, was filled with what could only be described as relief. I am Zalthar, leader of the Free Soulful movement, and I believe, Admiral, that we have much to discuss. Over the next hour, as the battle around them slowly died down, a stunning truth came to light. The Galactic Empire, it turned out, was not a monolithic entity. Zalthar and his followers had long opposed the aggressive expansion pursued by the ruling caste. The attack on Earth had been the final straw, spurring them into open rebellion. We have been waiting for an opportunity like this, Zalthar explained. Your attack has thrown the Empire into chaos. With your help, we can overthrow the warmongers and establish a new peaceful regime. Chen listened, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. Could this be the key to ending the war once and for all? I'll need to confer with my superiors, he said finally, but I think, Zalthar, that this could be the beginning of a very interesting alliance. As the human fleet regrouped, now joined by Zalthar's rebels, Chen couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. They had come seeking to strike a decisive blow against an implacable enemy. Instead, they might have found the means to forge a lasting peace. The war was far from over, but for the first time, Chen allowed himself to imagine a future where humans and Soulful worked together to explore the galaxy. It would be a long, difficult road, but as he looked out at the stars, no longer alien and threatening, but full of possibility, he knew it was a future worth fighting for. A new dawn. The Grand Assembly Hall of the newly constructed Galactic Concord Station bustled with activity. Delegates from Earth, the Free Soulful Coalition, and a dozen other species that had been drawn into the conflict filled the room. The air was thick with a mixture of tension and hope as representatives from former enemy factions sat side by side, preparing to forge a new future. At the center of it all stood Admiral Elena Reyes, now serving as Earth's primary diplomat. Her dress uniform, adorned with medals earned during the war, stood in stark contrast to the flowing robes of the soulful delegates and the various attire of other alien species. As she took her place at the podium, a hush fell over the assembly. Reyes looked out over the sea of faces, human, soulful, and others she was still learning to recognize, and felt the weight of the moment. Distinguished delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, we stand here today at the dawn of a new era. 5 years ago, our worlds were locked in a conflict that threatened to consume us all. Today, we come together not as enemies, but as partners in peace. She paused, letting her words sink in. The war taught us many things. It showed us the depths of our courage, the strength of our resolve. But more importantly, it taught us the value of understanding. We learned that even those we once called enemies could become our staunchest allies. Reyes nodded towards Zalthar, the leader of the Free Soulful, who sat in the front row. Together, we overthrew a regime built on conquest and subjugation. We proved that cooperation is stronger than conflict, that diversity is our greatest asset. As she spoke, holographic displays around the room came to life, showing images from the final days of the war. Human and Free Soulful ships fighting side by side against the remnants of the old empire, the liberation of worlds that had suffered under generations of oppressive rule. The first tentative meetings between human scientists and their soulful counterparts, sharing knowledge that would revolutionize both their societies. But our work is far from over, Reyes continued. The scars of war run deep, and there are still those who cling to the old ways of thinking. Our challenge now is to build a lasting peace, to create a galactic community where all species can thrive. She outlined the principles of the newly formed Galactic Concord: mutual defense, free exchange of knowledge and culture, respect for the sovereignty of all member worlds, and a commitment to peaceful exploration of the cosmos. We stand at a crossroads, Reyes said, her voice growing passionate. The choices we make here, in this room, will shape the destiny of countless worlds for generations to come. Will we choose fear and isolation or courage and cooperation? As she spoke, Reyes couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. The terror of first contact, the desperation of those early battles, the hope that had blossomed in the midst of war. She thought of Captain Sato and the crew of the Defiant, of all those who had sacrificed everything to give them this chance. The road ahead will not be easy, she admitted. We have centuries of mistrust and misunderstanding to overcome. But I believe that the bonds forged in the crucible of war will serve as a foundation for a peace that will outlast us all. Reyes stepped back from the podium, her part done. Now it was time for the delegates to debate and decide. As discussions began in earnest, she made her way to a quiet corner of the hall, where she was joined by an unlikely pair, Fleet Admiral Chen and Zalthar. "Quite a speech, Admiral," Chen said with a smile. "You missed your calling as a politician." Reyes chuckled. "I think I'll leave the politics to those better suited for it. Give me a starship any day." Zolthar's expression was harder to read, but his tone was warm. "You speak of a future I once thought impossible, Elena. A future where our children might grow up never knowing the fear and hatred that divided us for so long." "It won't be easy," Reyes admitted. "There's still so much we don't understand about each other." "But that's the beauty of it, isn't it?" Chen interjected. "We have an entire galaxy to explore, mysteries to unravel, and now we can do it together." As they spoke, a commotion near the center of the hall drew their attention. The delegates were calling for a vote. One by one, representatives from each world signaled their assent. Earth, the free exhalful worlds, a dozen others. With each affirmation, the excitement in the room grew. Finally, the last vote was cast. For a moment, there was silence. Then, as one, the assembly erupted in cheers. The Galactic Concord was born. As Reyes watched the celebration unfold, she felt a profound sense of hope. The war had cost them dearly, but it had also given them something precious, a chance to be part of something greater than themselves. She thought of the dreadnoughts, those ancient guardians that had saved humanity in its darkest hour. They would still have a role to play, not as weapons of war, but as tools of exploration and discovery. Already, plans were being drawn up for joint missions to the galactic core, to uncharted regions where no human or exorthal had ever set foot. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges they could scarcely imagine. But as Reyes looked out at the sea of faces, human, sorthal, and a dozen other species she was still learning to name, she knew they would face that future together. A new dawn had broken for the galaxy, and humanity, once alone and afraid in the cosmic night, now stood ready to take its place among the stars.